What is up, everybody? Welcome on in to Press Coverage, where we help you gain an edge in fantasy football. I'm your host, as always, Wyatt Bertolone. Tonight with me, Pete Nova. Keep it in the Roto World family to talk about some year two QBs and if we're buying or selling their current prices looking forward to the 2025 season. Pete, happy to have you here with me to talk these QBs. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Yeah, this is our first time doing, any type of collaboration together. So it's always interesting because you have more familiarity sometimes with other people where you have a cadence and you kind of get used to it. But I'm sure we'll gel pretty well here, and I'm excited to talk about this year two for that class from last year.
Yeah, well, before we talk about these QBs real quick, just tell everybody what you've been working on lately.
Yeah, so I recently launched my own channel, went off into my own venture. So it's called First Read Fantasy. You can find us over on YouTube and then First Read FF on Twitter/X, whatever you call it. But yeah, super excited. We're pumping out a bunch of content there, as well as obviously doing a bunch of stuff here at Player Profiler that you guys will start seeing in the next few weeks coming out.
Yeah, the risers and fallers shows that you've been doing with Chuck are really cool, really interesting stuff. I like that because that's a show that I like. What I try to do here is that we try to give actionable advice, right? That's what you're trying to do there. So you're telling people what's happening with these players and giving them some actionable advice to do with those changes in their ADPs and values and all those types of things.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about these QBs. First, of course, naturally, Jayden Daniels. Incredible rookie season, 21.5 PPR. Well, not PPR, but points per game in 2024. Just an incredible season, leading them deep into the playoffs. Then this offseason, the Commanders do what you do when you find your QB. You start to add around them as best as they can. They trade for Laramie Tunsil to help bolster that offensive line. They added Deebo Samuel via trade as well. They re-signed Zach Ertz. Could do some little bit better moves than that, I would say, for Jayden Daniels. But, he made a lot out of a little last year. I imagine he can do it again because he was just super composed. I think that was the thing that impressed me the most. The physical talent, his running, everything fantastic. But what impressed me the most about Jayden Daniels is from the moment he stepped on the field, he looked poised in the NFL and, the moment was not bigger than him, you know. And now for 2025, the prices are obviously really expensive. He's QB3 basically everywhere you look. Is that a price that you're willing to pay for your drafts in 2025?
I think Jayden Daniels is kind of the sweet spot where you're not paying second round capital for him, like maybe Josh Allen or even Lamar Jackson, who slips into there sometimes in redraft. But Jayden Daniels, like when you start to look at the board, he's usually like a back end third. Sometimes he goes right next to Lamar. But you start to look at some of the guys in that range, and it's like, do you want the running back 10, to 11? Do you want the wide receiver 13, 14, or do you want the quarterback 3 who, when you look at the average points per game, compared to, let's say, quarterback 5, 6, 7, 8, he's averaging likely, 4 to 5 more points. How much of an advantage is that securing that at that position as opposed to maybe getting a couple, maybe 1 or 2 points per game more with like Kenneth Walker, who, maybe Kenneth Walker is not the best example, but let's just call it Kyron Williams, who's running back 12 right now.
Yeah. With elite QBs, it's always tough for me in seasonal leagues and straight up like redraft leagues. In anywhere where you're going to have a portfolio like best ball, I think you have to make sure you have some, investment in all the elite QBs, some amount of exposure. But in seasonal leagues, redraft leagues, I tend to only really draft these players if they fall a little bit. Maybe if they fall around or two, I might get invested. If the room tells me that no one really wants to draft the elite QBs and let them fall, then I might get invested. But I do think it's a really tough value proposition for any elite QB any year because of you can fall behind at positions really quickly.
Well, that's really the thing, right? It always looks like super enticing to take the quarterback, right? Because maybe you're not really in love with the players that are there, like the wide receivers. I see myself doing that sometimes in best ball, like you're sharing. And then you take a quarterback like Daniels round 3, and then, like you said, you start to kind of fall behind at skill positions. And, it doesn't always, like, you kind of have to land the plane more
Yeah.
effectively and really have to hit on those picks. But I mean, when you think about Daniels, right? Like, is there a world where I get it. Everyone thinks Deebo Samuel's quote unquote washed, right? Like he had a bad year last year. I don't necessarily think it's like a huge upgrade, right, from a pass catcher standpoint, but there is a possibility like Debo is utilized, right, as a running back in the red zone, or maybe they get creative with him. Where is there, I mean, in your opinion, is there a world where maybe Daniels loses out on some touchdowns for Debo, or am I overthinking it? And because they also didn't really bring in a big time running back either, which I thought they were
Hmm.
going to.
Yeah, I definitely thought they'd bring in running back. Maybe Debo Samuel is part of that solution for them, just a little bit. It's like another weapon the backfield.
Sure.
It's crazy to say because Jayden Daniels is so amazing, and people I'm sure in the comments are going to come after us at, when they watch this video. But like, yeah, it's possible that Jayden Daniels has a worse season than he did as a rookie.
Sure.
Even though he was so good, because it's a really high bar to cross. I mean, he was fantastic. So if he regresses slightly and only averages 20 points per game this year, instead of 21.5, it's still really good, but it is slightly worse than he did last year. He could lose touches in the red zone. Like, I do think it's interesting that Jayden Daniels was used so much inside the 5 as a rookie, considering his slighter frame for QB. Now he held up pretty good. He did deal with like a midseason injury a little bit, played through it, which he actually slowed down a little bit during that time. Did a little bit less running. Maybe it could have been an even better rookie year. But it does surprise me a little bit that they ran him so much, where everything's so condensed. It's much more likely that he gets hit. Maybe Deebo Samuel is part of the plan. I don't think it's that crazy.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, you mentioned red zone carries. I mean, he had 39, which is ranked number 2. And that's also in addition to him missing some games, right? Or
Right.
and even when he came back, he really didn't look like there was like that. And we're gonna talk about Bo Nix at some point, but like there was the conversation: is Bo Nix the rookie of the year because Daniels had like a slow like
Yeah.
couple of games in the middle of the season after the rib injury? But I think we all could tell he was just probably still a little banged up. So
Yeah.
is there a world where maybe, I mean, these guys are never fully healthy during the entire season, right? Everyone's dealing with something. But again, it also looked like they didn't really try to run them nearly as much towards the back end of the year, or at least towards that middle, like week 8 to week 11 in that range.
Yeah, I think it's something that we always have to consider at least slightly. Sometimes it's not something that comes into my analysis too much, but when a team goes deep in the playoffs like they did last year, I'm sure they're thinking about it again. And maybe they think about protecting Daniels just slightly more. Like maybe just, the next time they're inside the 5, let's hand it off to Brian Robinson this time. Like it's possible.
Or Debo, hey, or Debo
Or
Samuel.
Debo
I
Samuel.
and I will say the only other thing that kind of scares me a little bit from a slight regression is pace of play, right? Like they weren't nearly as up tempo as you would expect. They were 17th in pace of play, and I think to the good news is, right, from a passing standpoint, if you hope that Daniels is going to run, right, they were in the bottom third of the league for total passing plays per game, but at the same time, from a carries per game standpoint, he was number 3 for all quarterbacks with 8.7, which I probably don't need to share because I'm sure we all kind of could believe that without me.
Yeah.
That's not mind blowing information there. So
Yeah, pace play is definitely interesting. Cliff Kingsbury is a dude who we like for that reason. I would guess, if anything, it's just the fact that they were winning so much, winning by a lot, that the offense didn't have to do quite as much in some
yeah,
games.
number 4 in game script too. So
Yeah,
that kind of bodes well into your argument there too. So
yeah. All right, now you brought up Bo Nix. He's next up on our show sheet here. Um, him in 2024, fantastic as well. 19.4 points per game. I think outperformed most people's expectations. Even Bo Nix Bulls, who I kind of count myself as one of them. I thought he was going to go in the first round. I actually thought he was going to go to the Broncos. I thought he was Sean Payton's perfect quarterback because he was definitely the type of quarterback who'd come in and throw slants for him all day. But even vastly outperformed his fantasy projection, I thought. Ran a lot more than I think people thought he would. He actually ran a good amount in college, but I don't know if people thought this is going to be running QB in the NFL, but he showed that a good amount. And then again, team finds their young QB. They try to add some weapons around him. They had Evan Ingram this year. They drafted RJ Harvey to really improve that running back room. They drafted Pat Bryant, who they drafted him earlier than most people thought he would go, but Sean Payton singing the praises of Pat Bryant. He obviously thinks very highly of him. Where are you at on Bo Nix?
I think Bo Nix is kind of the sweet spot for me when we talk about not drafting quarterbacks super high, right? Like I look at quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield, right? Like even like you look at Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, right? These are guys that go after Jayden Daniels. Bo Nix is somewhere around that QB9 area, right? Even a lot of times behind Kyler Murray. I think it's kind of the sweet spot because you get him like like almost at like 100th pick. So he's almost slipping outside the top 100. He's like borderline right around there. And I think if you're punting the quarterback position, it's not punting, but not taking one with high draft capital. Like if I'm not getting Allen, Lamar, and Jane Daniels in a managed league, I generally don't want to spend the capital on Hurts, Mahomes, like Baker. I'd rather just shoot for these bargain pieces, which a lot of these rookie quarterbacks after Daniels are. But when you look at Knicks, I mean, and you brought up the rushing too. In college, I mean, he had 3 out of his 5 seasons with over 300 rushing yards, right? So, like, I don't think people really, like you said, like, I don't think people really thought of him as a guy that would do it, but like, they used him a ton, right? Like, in his first 2 years at Auburn, he scored 7 rushing touchdowns. And then obviously at Oregon, right? He had the 510 in 2022.
Mhm.
And so I think I'm not going to sit here and say I expected him to be Jayden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, some of these upper echelon, but he can get it done with his legs. And I think the big benefit for Knicks is the offensive line, right? This is the best offensive line of these rookies that from last year that we're going to talk about. Like he does have the best offensive line, which I honestly think is really a blessing in disguise because he didn't really have the best weapons, but wasn't always the best player under pressure in college, and that's why they had him running all that quick game to get it out of his hands. And that offensive line really helped him progress through the season and give him a lot of time.
That offensive line is a blessing. It's for any QB. It shows how much an offensive line can matter, how much an offensive system can matter, because that's really all he had. He had Cortland Sutton, and then not much going for him.
Yeah,
Marvin Mims was a nice player, but he's kind of a gadgety, used in certain situations player, not a reliable every down player for him.
sure.
It's really that offensive line was stellar, and the offensive system was good for him. Knicks, for me, where he goes, it's tough. I think his price is appropriate for who he is as a player and what his projection is, but I don't
Sure.
find myself wanting to click it often just because of some of the other QBs going around him, one of which we're going to be talking about pretty soon here. And because honestly, I'd rather wait for even another QB who we're going to be talking about later, who's probably my favorite amongst these year two QBs at cost. So I don't find myself getting a ton of exposure to him again in any kind of best ball format where you're drafting QBs like an underdog. I'm going to be drafting some just to get some exposure. I want to have some exposure because I do think that he has a high fantasy projection and he has shown very high weekly ceilings, which
Sure.
you want in those formats. But in seasonal, yeah, I think I'm probably going another direction if I feel like I want to take a QB that in that range, or I'm just waiting.
Yeah, for me, look, it really depends on what's going to be on the board at the time, right? And I know
Mhm.
that sounds like a cop out, right? But like I mean, you look at the guys going around Knicks, at least in best ball formats, because I like to use best ball just because it's what's being most drafted right now. Now, people
Yeah,
draft differently in best ball than redraft, of course, but it's the most not accurate, but it is the most accurate data to go off of than redraft right now.
I agree.
But you look
Yes.
at guys, it's like Debo Samuel, DeAndre Swift, Calvin Ridley. If you're high on Ridley on a bounce back, Tony Pollard, Jonnu Smith, Isaiah Pacheco, right? Khalil Shakir, Jacoby Myers. I really like Ricky Pearsall, right? So if it came down to taking Ricky Pearsall and my wide receiver room wasn't maybe great, yeah, I would take Ricky Pearsall and punt Knicks and then go get one of these other bargain quarterbacks. Because to your point, like there's just a lot of value, and we kind of alluded to it before, but there's just a lot of value, once you start to get to later rounds. There's so many quarterbacks that are gonna have really high floors, and if like outside of the top 3 guys, the points per game difference again is not going to be that much different. If you're taking the 15th ranked quarterback in points per game or the 10th ranked quarterback or even 8. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, you look at
Yeah.
the points per game difference and there was only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 guys last year, 6 guys that had 20 points or more. And then a lot of guys clump in at that 19 and 18 points per game. And again, I'd love to get that 20 points per game, but it's a 1 to 2 point per game difference. It's not a game changer is what I'm going at. And so, yeah, I'm fine punting Knicks if you prefer some of these other guys going behind him.
And to your point, then you also have to think about the point per game differential between who you would be drafting if you didn't draft Knicks compared to who you'd be able to add later on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now we're gonna be right back to talk about Caleb Williams, but before we do that, let's hear from the Podfather.
Hey, what if I told you there was a Dynasty app where you could get player lifetime values, evaluate trades, including draft picks out to 2028, compare the advanced metrics of 2 players, look up the sentiment, buy, sell, hold on players? Well, there is a mobile app that has all of that and more called the Dynasty Dominator, and it's $5 in the App Store on Google Play. This is my gift to you, the most affordable Dynasty League domination app available today. And if you already have it, the 2025 class is ready to download. Let's go!
We're back here on Press Coverage with Pete Nova talking about some year 2 QBs, and we're on to Caleb Williams. Rookie year, kind of up and down. We saw some of the highlights. We saw some of the ceiling we expected from him, but we saw a lot more lowlights from him in that first year for Chicago. Offensive line was dreadful. Offensive system was dreadful. He had the weapons, but it didn't really matter to an extent because everything was failing around him. And a lot of his bad habits really showed their face in that rookie year. Held onto the ball a lot, took a lot of sacks, tried to do a little bit too much at times. 15.3 points per game on the year. Not great. But this offseason, Ben Johnson is in as head coach. The head coach that everybody wanted to come to their team who had an opening. They trade for Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson to bolster that offensive line. They draft Colson Lovett in the first, Luther Burden in the second round. They're really just building around Caleb Williams. I have a lot of faith in Caleb Williams going to 2025 because I believe in Ben Johnson and what he does and the fact that it's all there for him now. I think they made the moves they need to make to have him be able to reach the expectations that people have been putting on him as, since he was a college QB when he was anointed, as this amazing QB before he even played it down in the NFL, which was warranted, based on what he was doing in college. It was incredible. And now I think we could possibly see it this year. You look at where he's going after Bo Nix, QB 11, QB 12 range, kind of like that area. Are you interested in Caleb Williams in 2025?
I am interested in Williams just because it's more about the intrigue. It's hard to not want to get some exposure, as you said. Loaded up on weapons, brought in Ben Johnson. I mean, I could repeat all those things, but I mean, those are all things that drive me to wanting to take that chance on him. The thing I would say that concerns me slightly about Caleb is I just don't really love that they didn't really address the run game. And now some people might look at that and say, that's good, right? They're going to throw the ball more, right? And Caleb was 7th in passing attempts last year. I think that hurt him more than help him, right? I mean, the dude at times, team pass plays per game 37 last year. There were times he threw the ball 40 plus times. Like, I just didn't think it was conducive for a rookie to thrive, especially with a really bad offensive line. Now they address the offensive line. They bring in an OC. I think Ben Johnson has a plan. I just really would have hoped that they would have brought in a running back, and maybe there is something coming down the pipe. Maybe Nick Chubb is coming. Maybe it's J.K. Dobbins. Who knows? But what I would say about Caleb is the offensive line should give him some time, right? And that is beneficial to him and his growth. And I look at him and we talk about the legs. I mean, he was number 7. I mean, he was 7th ranked in carries, so he does provide some upside with his legs a little bit. I'm curious to see how Ben Johnson uses a quarterback that actually can run. I mean, he was tied to Jared Goff for the last few years, who didn't run. Are they going to get creative? I don't think they're going to put Caleb in harm's way to run necessarily. They're not going to have him go out there run read option, but again, he is decently fast. I mean, when you look at his rushing yards last year, 44, 34, 56, 41, 70, 33, 39. I mean, he had some decent totals, and you're talking, even if he's just rushing for 30 yards, that's 3 points. Like, that raises the floor where you get 3 points, you throw 1 touchdown, and you throw for 150 yards. I meant to say 30 rushing yards, not 3 points. You're looking at giving yourself like somewhere around a 15-point floor, right? And then in those games where he throws 2 touchdowns, now you're looking at gravy, right? I'm not sitting here saying I'm salivating over his rushing upside, but to your point, I just think he is a good value, right? And I don't know how you don't even just maybe get a little interested in him, especially at that cost. And Caleb is a guy where maybe with Knicks, I'm not backing Knicks up as much because I trust the system. We've seen him do it in this system. I trust the offensive line going into another year. And I just trust Sean Payton, right? But with Caleb, I probably would back him up, right? Where I'd probably want to get maybe a veteran, which I don't love to draft 2 quarterbacks as much, but I'd maybe shoot for maybe, I'm trying to think of where Jared even I go back to Jared Goff, but even maybe pairing him up with like a Matthew Stafford, who maybe he's just going to be a guy on waivers. But let's take a guy like, I don't know, maybe a CJ Stroud, who's actually quarterback 17. Like you could pair Caleb and CJ up, and it wouldn't shock me if one of those guys ends up in the top 10. So, I think Caleb's priced really well. I think this is fair for what he did last year and what you can expect this year. So, yeah, I'd say I'm in. I'm not as extremely bullish as others. I prefer some other guys from last year, but I'd say I'm in at his cost. It just depends on how the draft falls.
I am pretty bullish on Caleb Williams. I'm one of those people. When we were talking about Bo Nix, he is the one who I said in the same range. Like I'd rather have him than Bo Nix currently. You bring up his rushing, which I think is very important. His points per game is actually like possibly under where it should have been for rushing for almost 500 yards. He didn't rush for a single touchdown, which is I think a little bit of an anomaly. He had a couple rushing touchdowns in there. Obviously, that it bolsters those fantasy points a little bit, which I do think is going to happen this year. And I'm just really excited for what Ben Johnson can do for him with these weapons. I think adding Luther Burden and Colson Loveland are great for the quick game, which I think he needs. It helps him out of his bad habits if the ball's out of his hand quicker, which I think Ben Johnson's going to do. I think it's a smart thing to do for him. We started to see them actually do it a little bit last year after we had the coaching shakeup for the Bears last year. There was a lot of just quick hitters to DJ Moore, which I expect him to get some more of those this year too. It's just, I believe in the talent. I think he has some flaws. I think those flaws still exist to an extent, but I think Ben Johnson can hide those flaws pretty well. And I'm really excited for what his potential is. I want to be aggressive on his ADP everywhere, basically.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think that the only other thing I would say is you talk about the quick game, right? And we look at his metrics from last year. I mean, he was number 1 in deep ball attempts. I don't expect that to happen again. I mean, granted, they brought in Luther Burden, right? Like this offense should be way more creative. But again, to your point, like the best thing for a young quarterback is quick game, getting it out of their hands, not letting them think too much, getting them in an easy rhythm, right? It's kind of like, it's like the argument for a wide receiver, right? Like you don't wait to get your star wide receiver a target in the third quarter, right? Like that is the thing that drives me nuts is when you have teams that have these star wideouts that they don't even throw the ball their way. You get them Tom Brady did
They should have
best.
a target on the first drive every time.
Just they need to be involved. They just need a little. It's like you just need a little taste, right? And so I think with Caleb, right, like you mentioned, the quick game, like it should be there. And I think Ben Johnson, what we saw them do with the Lions, like that's something that he can definitely. It's going to be a way more creative offense in general. So I'm excited to see it. You're more bullish than I am. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not going to have exposure to him. I already have a decent amount in best ball. And I think the argument's fair. I think him and Knicks are kind of grouped up because they're the closest in ADP. And then the other guys that we'll talk about are a little bit closer in ADP as well.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. Lots of risk with Caleb Williams. Like there's a real possibility that like those bad habits are just who he is in the NFL. Like he can't escape them. He could be broken by his rookie year. We've seen that happen to QBs, unfortunately, plenty of times. But that potential that he has, and I think that Ben Johnson can hide those flaws. It makes me want to be bullish on his ADP.
Sure.
Now, next QB, perhaps the one I'm most excited about at cost. That's Drake Maye. His rookie year didn't start right away. Jacoby Brissett got some starts, which I kind of understand. People said that Drake Maye might need a little bit of time coming into the NFL. I didn't really think that was the case. I thought he should have been day one starter. But anyways, you look at over the entire course of the year, 14.4 points per game, but that's a little fuzzy because there's a game where he got some relief time. There's a game at the end of the season where he didn't actually really play. If you look at just the games he started and finished, it's 17.1 points per game, really held up by his rushing. He was incredible as a runner in a short time. He was 9th in rushing yards among QBs, even starting less games than a lot of these other QBs. Again, a running theme with these rookie QBs. When a team finds their QB, they do what they can to try and build around them. This offseason, the Patriots, they were in on a lot of wide receivers. They were only able to get Stephon Diggs, but Stephon Diggs is there. We won't talk about his boat antics right now because, I'm not sure if that's actually going to affect him or not. But then they draft Will Campbell. They draft Trevion Henderson. They draft Kyle Williams, building around Drake Maye. Love to see it. I'll just say right off the bat before I even toss it to you, like I said, I love this QB. He's my favorite at cost. This is the one where I am attacking this ADP heavy. I'm trying to get as much exposure as I can to Drake Maye. I won a lot in best ball. I won a lot in redraft leagues. What say you?
Yeah, I'm with you there. Drake Maye, I prefer him over Nick's at cost. Same with Caleb. I like what they did with the offense, right? I mean, I like what they did with the team as a whole. New England last year tied for worst with Seattle for offensive line blocking efficiency per Pro Football Focus. They did address that this year. Offensive line, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, man. Offensive line I'd rather a rookie quarterback have an awesome offensive line than an awesome, set of skill positions. I just, that's just how I feel. If they're a good quarterback, even as a rookie, they can raise maybe the floor. It's just the offensive line is so important, and that foundation. I think they did a really good job to at least address it this year. They add Morgan Moses, who I think has plenty left, and he's going to be playing at right tackle. Obviously, they draft Will Campbell in the first round very high. They brought in Garrett Bradbury from Minnesota. I mean, that he's not great. I'm not jazzed about that necessarily, but it's only it's only up from here. And I also would say too that defensively, you would sit there and say, it's a good game script from a passing standpoint. If the defense is bad, they'll be trailing, and that's good for Maye. But I don't always agree with the young quarterbacks that's the best thing. Even though in fantasy you think playing from behind, throwing the football, that's what we want. This defense was 30th in EPA last year, New England, right? I expect them to be a lot better. They spent a ton of money on that defense. And so, I expect them to be in games where maybe there's not a ton of pressure to have Drake Maye drop back and throw the football a ton. And you alluded to it, but when you look at his points per game last year, he was pretty good when you remove the games that he left early, right? The games where he got thrown in, I think he got thrown in for a drive for the Jets. We're throwing those out, but the rushing upside is there too with Maye, right? He can run, and they bring in Stephon Diggs, right? Stephon Diggs looks good so far. I don't know what to expect for Diggs. I'm not there yet. There's certain guys where we're so early on, especially with these guys that are coming off an injury. I can't make a formulated opinion on Diggs unless I'm drafting in best ball. I'll have some shares maybe here and there if his ADP drops, and I'll get some exposure. But I like Kyle Williams. And I actually happen to think Pop Douglas is actually a pretty explosive wide receiver that doesn't really get enough credit.
With you.
And then obviously Hunter Henry, who is just a guy that just consistently scores inside the red zone. So I think it's wheels up for Drake Maye. I think the cost is good. I think Vrabel's going to get him going and that entire team going in the right direction. And I think the cost is just too good to ignore.
Yeah, as you said, one of the worst situations for a rookie QB to be in last year, and he still performed. He still found a way. And then, I think secretly, possibly the biggest move, which I was saving, is that, Josh McDaniels in there as offensive coordinator, which, listen, a lot of people have a lot of bad things to say about Josh McDaniels, and a lot of them are warranted. But as an offensive coordinator, at least while in that Patriots building, he's been great as an offensive coordinator. He brings some stability to this offense and will build an offensive system for Drake Maye that I think will help him have some success. Again, I want to be really aggressive on Drake Maye's price. You look at where he's going, being drafted as QB 16, QB 17, this is mid QB 2, and he's a QB 1 for me. So you're telling me I can wait till the end of my drafts, be the last person to take a QB, and I get Drake Maye? I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and one thing to note too, and strength of schedule, I try not to put too much into it, but at least if you go on to some other sites, like I mean, they do say Drake Maye has a really favorable schedule. A lot of people out there will say his strength of schedule is like top 5, so that bodes well for him as well. And I love the nod to Josh McDaniels because to your point, he might be a jerk, but he knows what he's doing when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. And if Drake Maye can take hard coaching, I think they'll be pretty successful.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our second to last QB of the day. That's JJ McCarthy, which the setup for this is pretty simple because we didn't get to see much of him as he tore his meniscus in the preseason. We got to see one game of preseason action from him where he looked, I would say, pretty good in that time. Granted, preseason, so big grain of salt on that one. But then this offseason, Vikings showed some confidence in him by letting Sam Darnold walk. They had Will Fries, trade for Jordan Mason, draft Donovan Jackson, draft Ty Felton, add a little bit around what is already a really good offensive system and offensive roster for JJ McCarthy. He's going much later in drafts, not as high of a fantasy projection as the other QBs we've been talking about to this point. Is he someone you're even interested in seasonal long leagues? Is this only a best ball league thing where you're already planning to draft multiple QBs? Will you pair him with as you were saying, Jared Goff, possibly in the seasonal leagues if you want to get some JJ McCarthy? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's was likely the route I'm going. Like JJ is a guy that I think, has some good upside. You look at what Kirk Cousins was able to do with Kevin O'Connell, right? If you take out 2023 because he was hurt, but I mean, if we count 2023, Kirk Cousins 19.3 points per game. I'm not going to sit here and say that, he's going to be as good as Kirk Cousins was, but to me, you look what Cousins was able to do with O'Connell in 2022. He was 11th. In 2021, he was 12th, and in 2020 he was 11th as well. So I mean, you're getting QB1 finishes for Cousins, and I'm not going to sit here and act like Kirk Cousins, JJ is automatically just better than Cousins because he's not. But he also has, again, we keep talking about it, but he has legs. He has rushing upside. Like he can run with the football, and that should raise the floor. And then I think to your point, they added to this offensive line, and so that excites me as well. They added to the trenches, and with JJ, there's something to be said about a guy sitting out a year or two, right? And it's probably a pretty humbling experience. I know he was going through that whole VR thing that Jayden Daniels was doing. I don't know how much stock to put into it. I think
Yeah.
all teams should probably try it out. I mean, because
Right.
to me, it's times are changing, right? You have to adapt, and I mean, I don't know how you could think that's a deterrent. I mean, you can basically get reps, and it's not completely the same, but the point is with Daniels, he's a guy that I'm not Daniels with McCarthy. He's a guy that I am pairing, with a veteran quarterback, maybe like I don't know, like a Brock Purdy even, right? Where, what I will say is this, it really depends on bench sizes because if you're playing in a league where there's like 6 bench sizes, I don't generally want to roster a second quarterback because there's going to be plenty out there. Heck, I could probably go pick up Matt Stafford in leagues like that, right? And he's going to give me a decent floor, but not a high ceiling, and be okay with that, right? So it really depends on bench sizes for, where I will be drafting him. Obviously, in best ball, I love the exposure, but in a managed redraft league, if it's the 6 bench sizes or left, I don't know how much exposure I'll have to him.
Yeah. I'm excited for JJ McCarthy. I think he was a good prospect. I love QBs who play for Kevin O'Connell in the Vikings. Like I expect a lot out of those QBs just in general. But in one QB leagues, seasonal leagues, I'm probably not going to be touching a lot of JJ McCarthy. He's just going to be a player who I have like very high on my list of if I need to stream QB, this is where I'm going. Now, Superflex leagues, I'm really excited to draft him as my QB2. Best ball, I want to get lots of exposure there because I believe in him. But one QB leagues, I'm just going to draft Drake Maye at the end of my draft instead of JJ McCarthy, and I'll keep an eye on JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, and you had said too, from an ADP standpoint, I mean, May's going around 124, QB 16, right? JJ's going 137, right? I'd rather bite the bullet, and if I haven't taken a quarterback by then, not get greedy and just go ahead and take Drake May because you've drafted skill position players for a ton of rounds already. I'm fine going ahead and taking May. I'd much rather do that than take a chance on JJ. Who, to your point, I think it's ironic though because one guy, JJ, has amazing weapons and a really good head coach, and then the other side with Drake May, it's a new system, and it's weapons that we're kind of excited slightly about ish, but it's kind of wait and see. We don't really know how they'll pan out. So
Yeah, but I think the real big difference between them is that we saw May perform without those weapons or the system or anything, and we know he's going to run a good amount. Whereas we're hoping JJ McCarthy adds some with his legs.
Yeah.
Last QB of the day, Michael Penix. 15.2 points per game in the 3 starts he got to end the 2024 season. He did close out the season with a 26 fantasy point day, but end of the season, a little grain of salt there as well. This offense, it's basically just the same thing. They just rolled into 2025. They're just, they addressed the defense a lot this offseason, which they needed to do. But the offense is basically just rolling the same. Michael Penix now, this is his job. How are you feeling about Penix?
At least from a dynasty perspective, I love taking him. In redraft, though, this is a guy with minimal upside with his legs. We're talking about a pocket passer. And I get worried, right, about what the ceiling is for a pocket passer. You look at guys like Jared Goff, who have been able to give us top 10 seasons 2 years in a row as a pocket passer that don't do much with their legs. But Goff is also a really seasoned veteran. So when you look at, Penix, right, the weapons aren't that great. You have Drake London. We have no freaking idea what Kyle Pitts is, if he'll ever be anything again. I have no idea. I really just have no understanding of what's going on with Kyle Pitts still, but I just know I'm staying away. Darnell Mooney's interesting. I'm not going to sit here and say Darnell Mooney's not a good player. I think he is. And then outside of that, you don't really have anything behind them, right? You have, I think Ray McLeod is still there.
Yeah.
Did he end up going somewhere else? I think he's still there. And then, you have 2 really good running backs, right? I think the system is really good, right? So I think it's quarterback friendly. Obviously comes from the McVay tree, which is good. But overall with Penix, I'm not touching him in managed redraft leagues. I'll grab him if he ends up having a really strong start to the year and he's on waivers, which likely in many leagues he's going to be on waivers. He's probably not going to go drafted unless people really like to draft 2 quarterbacks in your leagues, which I would really strongly, advise against, especially again with bench sizes not being super big.
I feel you. I think Penix could be a good QB in the NFL. Not sure how good he will be in fantasy because you said he's not really going to run. He's actually athletic, but he will not run. That is not his game. Whether that's due to all the injuries he suffered during college and he's not trying to have another one of those or what it is, but he doesn't really run. The only time I'm really drafting him is, on Underdog. If I've taken Drake London and I want to get the stack, I'll take Michael Penix, just to correlate my team a little bit there. But other than that, I don't have a lot of interest. Yeah, Superflex, like he's going to be on my radar as a QB2, but not one of the first ones that I'm going to be looking at because, again, not a runner. So what's the fantasy ceiling really? But yeah, Underdog, a little bit. That's really it for me here.
I think, I mean, and maybe it's crazy to say, but I might rather take a chance on Bryce Young, who goes right behind him. He goes right behind him. So
Young showed a little bit of that rushing at the end of the season last year. I shouldn't even say a little bit of rushing. He showed a good amount of rushing at the end of the season last year. So yeah, I would definitely be taking Young.
Well, he had 20 touchdowns in his last 10 games too. So, there's something to be said about that. He adds Tet, and I know some people are high on are not high on Tet. I think he's going to be great for what they want to do. I think he's
I
going to
love Tet. You don't have to convince me here. I'm really excited for Tet and Young there in Carolina for sure.
Hey, they actually look. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the sexiest wide receiver room, but there's some depth there. I mean,
there's a reason to be excited.
Yeah. I mean, look, Hunter Renfrow, like Who knows? Maybe he could be something decent, maybe a chain mover. But oh wait, no, Renfro's there now because I know I feel like the Titans started adding a bunch of veterans too. Pretty sure Renfro did
You know
end
what?
up
You know, you're
going
making me
there
second guess.
because
Either way, there is reasons to be excited.
yeah. Either way, Renfro is he did sign there. He did sign there. I think.
Okay.
Someone's gonna be mad at me. Somebody's gonna be mad in the
Yeah.
comments about that, but that's all right.
Well, if they watch this long, I appreciate you out there. Please let us know that we're wrong about Hunter Renfro. Be happy to be
Yeah,
wrong
that'd be
about
great.
it. I appreciate all of you out there. But Pete, this was great. Really enjoyed having you here with me. Before we get out of here, though, promote whatever you got going on again for everybody out there. Tell them where to follow you, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I am here again with Player Profiler. Me and Chuck Bass do the Risers and Fallers show. Comes out weekly. We just dropped our OTAs, Risers and Fallers, this week, and we'll be dropping another one either end of Friday or early next week. So be on the lookout for that. And then I just launched my new YouTube channel, First Read Fantasy. You can check us out there, and then on Twitter you can give us a follow at First Read FF. But it's been a pleasure, Wyatt. I appreciate it. Like I said, you never know how these are going to go when it's a first time, jumping on with somebody. But I think we gelled pretty well, and yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, appreciate you, sir. On my side of things, you can follow me on Twitter at WyattB_FF. Make sure you're liking and subscribing to everything Player Profiler. Go sign up and play on Fast Draft. If you haven't already, you can use code Wyatt for a $50 deposit match over there. And lastly, I've got some articles that have been coming out on the website on playerprofiler.com, all addressed towards best ball, different kinds of strategies, players to target, all that kind of stuff. So make sure you're checking those out if you're drafting over there. I appreciate all of you. We'll see you next time.